When we talk about relationships, one of the most dangerous traps a woman can fall into is the slow, almost invisible act of shrinking herself to fit into a man's comfort zone. And I call it dangerous because it doesn't happen all at once. It's rarely dramatic. It happens quietly, subtly, moment by moment. It's when you choose not to say what you really think because you don't want to upset him. It's when you set aside your ambition because you sense it makes him feel less secure. It's when you start lowering your standards, not because you believe they were wrong, but because you want to make things easier for him. That is shrinking, and it is one of the fastest ways to lose the very essence of who you are. The irony is most men won't even ask you to do this directly. Some will, but many won't. Instead, they'll reward your shrinking. They'll show approval when you prioritize their needs over your own. They'll encourage your silence because it means less conflict. And before you realize it, the relationship becomes an invisible contract. The less of yourself you bring, the more peace you get to keep. But peace built on silence is not peace, it's suppression. And every time you shrink yourself to protect his comfort, you send a signal to your own mind that your voice doesn't matter, your growth doesn't matter, and your identity doesn't matter. Now let's pause there because I want you to really hear this. You cannot love someone fully if you are hiding yourself from them. That is not love, it's performance. You are not a partner in that kind of relationship. You are a mirror reflecting back only what he wants to see. And that's a lonely place to live. Psychology teaches us something very powerful here. The human need for authenticity is just as critical as the human need for connection. If you constantly trade authenticity for connection, you will end up with neither. You'll lose yourself, and eventually the connection will fracture too, because a bond built on half-truths cannot sustain itself. Now, I know some of you may be thinking, but isn't compromise part of every relationship? Don't we all adjust a little for the people we love? And you're right. Compromise is healthy. But here's the difference: compromise bends without breaking. Shrinking breaks you over time. Compromise says, I'll meet you halfway because I value this relationship. Shrinking says, I'll abandon myself because I'm afraid you won't value me otherwise. Do you see the difference? One preserves your dignity, the other erodes it. Let me give you an example. Imagine a woman who loves her career, she's ambitious, she's thriving, but the man she's with feels threatened by her success. Maybe he jokes about it. Maybe he withdraws affection when she gets a promotion. Maybe he compares himself and falls silent every time she talks about her achievements. If she responds by downplaying her success, avoiding talking about work, or even turning down opportunities to keep him comfortable, what she's really doing is shrinking. She's telling herself that her growth must come second to his security. But in reality, a man who truly loves her would celebrate her growth, not resent it. This is why I say, never shrink yourself to fit his comfort zone, because the man who is right for you will not require it. In fact, he'll want the opposite. He'll want to see you rise, because when you rise, the relationship rises too. And here's the deeper truth: when you shrink yourself, you don't just lose your identity. You also rob the relationship of its potential, because the strongest relationships are built on two people showing up as their fullest selves. When one person is smaller, quieter, dimmer than they really are, the relationship becomes lopsided, and eventually it collapses under the weight of imbalance. There's also a spiritual dimension to this. Think about it. You were not created to be less than what you are. Every strength you have, every talent, every piece of your voice and your vision, it's all part of your design. To shrink yourself is not only a betrayal of you, it's also a betrayal of the life you were given. When you deny your own light, you deny the very purpose that makes you unique. And if a man is uncomfortable with your light, that is not a reflection of your worth. It's a reflection of his own insecurity. And here's the reality: a secure man is not threatened by your strength. A secure man doesn't need you to be smaller so he can feel taller. He knows who he is, and he celebrates who you are. That's the kind of relationship worth holding out for. Anything less is a slow erosion of your soul. So let me ask you, how many times in your life have you chosen silence when you wanted to speak? How many times have you chosen smallness when you wanted to stand tall? How many times have you abandoned your truth just to make a man feel comfortable? Because every one of those moments was a piece of yourself being chipped away, and you deserve more than that. Here's the bottom line: do not contort yourself to fit into someone else's frame. If he cannot hold space for the fullness of you, he is not your person. Love should feel like expansion, not confinement. It should feel like breathing deeper, not holding your breath. And the moment you feel yourself shrinking, the moment you feel your edges being shaved down to fit inside his box, that's the moment you need to pause and ask, what am I losing, and is this worth it? Because the truth is, the love that is meant for you will never require you to be less. It will call you to be more. It will invite your whole self to the table. And when you bring all of you, your voice, your ambition, your light, you don't just honor yourself, you give the relationship its best chance to thrive. So never shrink yourself to fit his comfort zone. Never confuse his discomfort with your duty to adjust. Never dim your light just to keep him from feeling small. Because the right man won't ask you to shrink, he'll make space for you to shine. And if there's one thing I want you to carry with you from this, remember this truth: love that costs you yourself is never love worth keeping. We need to be honest about something. In every relationship, sacrifice is inevitable. You sacrifice time, comfort, and sometimes even preferences, because that's the nature of building a life with another person. But there is a sharp, life-altering line between sacrifice and self-betrayal. And too many women confuse the two. Sacrifice is when you give because love moves you to, and the relationship is strengthened because of it. Self-betrayal is when you give because fear pressures you to, and the relationship gets weaker even though it looks like it's being held together. The difference is not just in what you do, but in why you do it and what it costs you. Think about this: compromise and sacrifice should leave you tired sometimes, but not empty. They should stretch you, but not erase you. They should honor both people, not just one. But self-betrayal leaves you questioning your worth. It leaves you restless at night because you know you abandoned something essential just to keep the peace. You gave away a part of yourself, not for love, but for survival. And here's the tragedy: if you do that enough times, you forget what pieces of yourself you even had to begin with. Psychologically, self-betrayal is devastating because it splits you in two. There's the version of you that knows what you feel, what you believe, what you need, and then there's the version of you that hides it all to maintain the relationship. Over time, the second version takes over, and the first version gets buried under layers of silence. That's when women wake up one day saying, "I don't even recognize myself anymore. I've lost who I am." But the truth is, you didn't lose yourself in one moment. You lost yourself in 100 tiny acts of self-betrayal. Here's what I want you to see clearly: love that demands you betray yourself is not love, it's dependency. Real love has room for two full selves. It doesn't ask one person to constantly diminish their needs, silence their voice, or abandon their values for the sake of harmony. Harmony at that cost is an illusion. It's the kind of peace that feels stable from the outside, but inside it's hollow, fragile, and always one more betrayal away from collapse. Let's put this into real life. Imagine you deeply value honesty, but the man you're with brushes off lies as no big deal. Each time you catch him being dishonest and you let it slide, you tell yourself it's just easier to ignore it than to argue. That's not sacrifice, that's self-betrayal. Because you've told yourself that your value, honesty, matters less than his comfort. And every time you do it, you chip away at your own integrity. Or maybe you've always dreamed of pursuing a particular path, going back to school, starting a business, moving to a new city. But he resists. He says it's impractical, inconvenient, maybe even selfish. So you let the dream die quietly, convincing yourself that keeping the relationship stable is more important. That's not sacrifice either. That's self-betrayal. Because sacrifice would mean you both weigh the dream against the needs of the relationship and find a middle ground. Self-betrayal means the dream is buried and only you paid the price. Do you see the difference? Sacrifice is shared. Self-betrayal is one-sided. Sacrifice strengthens the relationship because it's built on respect. Self-betrayal weakens it because it's built on silence. And here's where the philosophy cuts deep. To betray yourself is the greatest betrayal of all. Because every other betrayal you may face in life, someone lying to you, someone walking away, someone breaking their promise, you can recover from those if you still have yourself intact. But if you abandon yourself, if you walk away from your own values, your own needs, your own truth, then you've already lost the one person you can never afford to lose, you. This is why it's so important to guard that line between sacrifice and self-betrayal, because relationships will test it over and over again. And if you don't know the difference, you'll spend your whole life giving and still feel like it was never enough. Not because you didn't give enough, but because you gave the wrong things. You gave away pieces of your soul that should have never been on the table in the first place. So how do you know the difference? Here's a simple but powerful question to ask yourself. When I give this up, do I still feel like me? If the answer is yes, then it's likely sacrifice, an act of love that stretches you but doesn't erase you. If the answer is no, if you feel like you're disappearing piece by piece, then that's not sacrifice, that's self-betrayal. And let me tell you, no relationship is worth the cost of betraying yourself, because the man who truly loves you does not want a hollowed out version of you. He wants the real you, the you with opinions, dreams, needs, and boundaries. And if he doesn't, then what he wants is not partnership, but control, and you cannot call that love. This is why I tell women, do not confuse endurance with love. Endurance can make you tolerate things you should never tolerate. You can endure neglect. You can endure disrespect. You can endure silence. But endurance doesn't make those things love. It just makes them tolerable. And if you betray yourself long enough, you'll convince yourself that tolerating is the same as loving. It's not. Real love is not built on tolerance of pain. It's built on celebration of truth. So let me speak to you directly. If you're in a place where you feel you've been abandoning yourself, I want you to know it's not too late. You can stop. You can reclaim your voice. You can draw the line again. You can say, this is what I need. This is who I am, and I won't betray that anymore. It will feel terrifying at first because the relationship may shake. It may even fall apart. But if a relationship requires your betrayal to survive, then it's not worth saving anyway. The relationships that last, the ones that give life instead of draining it, are the ones where sacrifice is mutual and self-respect is intact, where you can give freely without losing yourself in the process, where your needs are not seen as threats, but as truths that matter. So don't confuse sacrifice with self-betrayal. Sacrifice honors love. Self-betrayal destroys it. Sacrifice says, I choose us. Self-betrayal says, I lose me. And if the cost of holding on to a man is losing yourself, that is far too high a price. Remember this, the greatest act of love you can ever give a relationship is bringing your full, unbroken self into it. Anything less, and you're not building love, you're just building survival. And survival is not the same as living. So here's the truth to hold on to. Love that requires you to betray yourself is not love, it's captivity. And you were never meant to live in chains.